This is Railroad Tycoon II, the Platinum Edition for Steam, and by extension, modern versions of Windows. I was thrilled to find this because for many years I had to run this in emulation or find an old computer or whatever. And it is my favorite Railroad Tycoon game. I wanted to show some of the differences between Railroad Tycoon II and Railroad Tycoon III, especially the advantages. So here we see 31 territory slots for Railroad Tycoon II. Here's Railroad Tycoon III. We'll take a look at the territories on Zombie USA from my territories tutorial. And notice it's visually very similar to Railroad Tycoon II. We have 24, not 31, potential territories, even though this is the later game. And I would argue that 31 isn't enough if you want to, for example, model the United States state by state. I would argue you need minimally 52 because you'd need Canada and Mexico on the borders separately. So anyway, that's one thing I'm not hugely fond of about 3. Here's another thing. Their map of Britain is almost city-free. I mean, they have London and Leeds and some random cities that don't really make a whole lot of sense necessarily. I mean, London, Manchester, Liverpool, and Leeds and Birmingham are all there, and Edinburgh is there, but many of the important cities from railroad history, like Bristol, for example, are not there. But Bath is there, which makes no sense. Penzance isn't there, Southampton isn't there. It's just totally stripped. And they don't have Calais on the French side or Dover on the British side if you wanted to do a pseudo channel tunnel, or really anything. I mean, they're very, very... And Dorset, why put Dorchester there? That doesn't make any sense either. It's just not that important to railroading town. Yeah, I mean, you could go on all day with this. And this is so sparse, actually, it could be difficult to even play this map, actually. At least if you're referencing real life at all. Now, I have done a revised British map right here. So it's got York, and it's got Crewe, and it's got... Actually, I haven't put Berwick upon Tweed here yet. I've also put a few territories, but I'm going to add Scotland in the near future if I continue developing this. But I have to add Berwick upon Tweed as the border city for the East Coast Main Line. And there's Southampton and Bristol. So I've added all these different missing cities. Scarborough is there now. Newcastle already was there, thankfully. Peterborough was already there, maybe. And Gloucester, that's important. Folkestone and Dover and Calais, of course. Have to have those. But I'm going to add more towns and more details and more events to this. Thankfully, even though the editor is not as versatile in Railroad Tycoon 3 as in Railroad Tycoon 2, it is not totally out of the question. You can work with it if you know what you're doing. In my next video, I'm going to explain a few details of that, actually, because I might as well. Now, a few more things. The locomotives. Many of these locomotives are fictitious, especially the modern ones. The NA90, I think, is some ripoff on General Electric's AC 6000, possibly. I don't remember. Some of these are legitimate, like the Red Devil and the HST 125 or Intercity 125. The older ones are generally authentic, like the DD40AX, which really should be the DD40X or the DDA40X, but it's there, and the big boy is there, and the A4 is there as the Mallard, of course. There are various reasonably decent historic locomotives here, but the modern ones are really inadequate. And I would argue that the futuristic science fiction ones that they add are really not ideal, because they basically were introduced much too soon in the game, so that we're playing it today and these science fiction locomotives appear years ago, and they're nothing like what was actually built in 2012 and 2015, for example. Thankfully, they kept the Brenner 412. I like that. It's a very handy... It's actually a handier locomotive in Railroad Tycoon 3 than in Railroad Tycoon 2. It's much less expensive to operate relative to this game. The Deltic appears in the wrong year. That's another irritating thing. At least they have the GP35. That's a cool feature. And you have the 01, the DR class 01. It's fantastic. So not all of it's bad news, but I would have preferred nicer modern choices. Like the USA 103 is not a real locomotive. They're basing that on the Genesis. But anyway, next video I'll show you how to add cities.